On this episode of the Trauma Lama Podcast, we'll talk about what actually happens to our brain on trauma. We get the chance to talk with another member of our community about their trauma journey and their road to recovery. And we'll talk about why you can't just get over it. I'm Stephanie. I made these Legos myself, and this is the Trauma Lama Podcast. Welcome, one and all, to the Trauma Lama Podcast. I am so glad you're here with me today. Any new viewers, I'm so glad that you were able to find us and that you're willing to tune in. I hope you really enjoy the content that I've got for you today. And for those that listened in on the first episode, welcome back. I'm glad that you were intrigued enough by the first episode to want to try us out again. I've had a really fun time so far putting together this podcast, and it is really like itching that teaching spot that I have within me where I get to teach people about, trauma and get to talk and hear about people's experiences. It's just been a really, really cool opportunity. So I'm going to keep doing it. But if you guys also agree and think I should keep doing it, then please leave a like and a comment below and maybe consider subscribing, depending on what platform you're using, so that you find out when I put out other episodes and get to keep listening to what I have to bring and to watch this community get built. So let's just get on with the show. Let's settle in and pull out those owner's manuals. Today, we're going to talk specifically about how our brain actually reacts to trauma in terms of the kind of biological processes that happen and what it ends up looking like psychologically and cognitively. It's been actually pretty groundbreaking for me to learn about this. And if anything, it gave me this lens of, oh, wow, I can actually kind of quantify this a bit more than just saying, well, subjectively someone might experience this or that. But we've actually been able to track what this looks like in our brain to give even more tangibility to what happens to us during trauma. So I'm really excited to get into this topic. So let's just jump in. To understand really how trauma affects the brain, we need to first understand how our brain is actually structured. So I'm going to use a model called the Triune Brain Model. It's a little bit on the outdated side, but it's the best way to kind of get this idea of like how our brains have evolved in terms of complexity and understanding. And it really helps explain what really happens with the trauma by using it in this viewpoint. And I'm also going to kind of use a bit of an analogy of what our brain and body would look like if it were a starship, because I might be a bit of a Trekkie, and I'm hoping maybe some of you out there are also Trekkies, because we tend to find each other everywhere. So yeah, I'm going to use that analogy and hope that it's going to bring a bit more relatability and make some more sense for us. So anyway, Triune Brain Model says that our brain is divided into three main parts. We've got the brain stem, the limbic system, and then our prefrontal cortex. So our brain stem, which a lot of people call the survival brain, this is like that very first and kind of most basic level of what's developed in our brain. I would look at this on a starship as the engine room of our body. So it handles all of the essential biological functions that keep us alive, like breathing, heartbeat, digestion, and temperature regulation. Fun fact, did you know that the brain stem is so well connected to the gut that idea of a gut instinct is actually a physiological thing? That in our gut, we might feel something so strongly that we just have to follow through with it. And some of those sensations actually start out in our gut, and the communication then happens from our gut up into our brainstem. Kind of cool, right? That this idea of gut instinct actually has a physiological starting point. I think that's very cool. But yeah, this brainstem really is the most primitive part of our brain, and its sole focus is on our survival, right? Our physiological survival. Next, on top of that, is the limbic system, or what we call our emotional brain. So you can think of this part of our brain as like the crew on the bridge. So the crew on the bridge, they're seated at their stations, and for the most part, they're taking in information from data systems or sensors on like inside the ship, outside the ship. They're just taking in all of this data. And so like our limbic system, it also takes in all of this sensory data, all this sensory information from our environment and from what we feel inside. And it uses our emotions to actually determine what our safety level is. So the limbic system is actually also home to two key players when it comes to understanding that safety level. The first is called the amygdala, which acts as our internal alarm system, and the hippocampus, which serves as like our mission log, where we would process and store memories. So our mission log would be where we actually keep notes of everything that happened. Does that make sense? I mean, it makes sense to me, so hopefully it makes sense to you guys too. And then finally, we have the prefrontal cortex. So it's like this third layer of the brain, right? We call that our thinking brain. This, to me, is like the captain of the ship, right? The captain of the ship is put in charge because they can take all of that data information that gets brought in by the crew, and the captain is able to look at mission logs, look at that data, and then go, okay, this is what makes the most sense right now for our safety. So this is what we're going to do. And that's what our prefrontal cortex does. It uses logic, reasoning, and context to help us make rational decisions, control our impulses, and plan for our long-term goals. So what happens when we're getting trauma data coming in from our environment? So put yourself in a place where you might have witnessed something to you terrifying, right? Maybe it's just watching a scary movie. Maybe it's a life event that you've had to live through. Put yourself back there in your brain when that event, that thing is happening. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, kicks in immediately, flagging the situation as life-threatening. The limbic system then takes over and our body goes into high alert. The captain, right, our prefrontal cortex, is actually at that point considered non-essential. And other non-essential functions within our mind, within our brain structure, they all go offline so that all of the energy in our brain and all of the focus can be channeled into keeping us alive. The limbic system becomes hypervigilant, constantly monitoring the environment for signs of safety, and then will tell our brainstem what it needs to actually do to survive. Whether that means we have to keep our heart rate up so that we're ready to maybe fight or flee as soon as we have to. It's going to tell our respiratory rate maybe to go up a little bit in order to bring in lots of oxygen so that then we can make a mad dash, or again, so that we can maybe fight off what's happening in front of us. Or maybe it's going to tell all of our systems to slow right the heck down so that it looks like we're dead. Gradually though, as you start to calm down, your limbic system will begin to pick up on signs that we're safe. But this can take some time and often requires assistance. But once our limbic system determines that the danger has passed, it sends signals in the brain that it's safe for the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus to come back online. And our nervous system will settle and will tell all of the rest of our body processes to go about things per usual. So when the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus come back online, that's where the magic happens, right? With the captain and the mission log back online and available again, you can start to process the event, making sense of what happened and creating a coherent narrative using context to go along with those feelings. And that's what actually helps us to contain a trauma within our memories and helps remind us that that's something that happened to us, but it's not happening right now. we're okay right now, right? This is a crucial step for healthy and rational healing because sometimes healing from trauma might feel impossible, and there could be a good reason for that. This is where we get to talk about this concept called neuroplasticity. So if your cognitive skills aren't developed enough, or if another traumatic event occurs before you can fully process the first one, your brain gets stuck in a loop. The hippocampus, right, our mission log, won't be able to properly store and process those context clues to go along with our memory of the event. And this is because neuroplasticity, which is essentially the brain's ability to change and adapt, works on this principle of where focus goes, neural firing flows. So if you're in a constant state of fear and survival, even if it's just low level state of fear and survival, those neural pathways for fear and hypervigilance and survival are going to be the ones that are being used all the time. And so they're going to grow stronger. But pathways for rational thought and full memory processing, where you do incorporate context, those pathways are going to get weaker. And over time, if they get weak enough where they're really not being used, our brain will actually prune away those neural pathways so that they don't exist anymore. This is why working with a professional can be so helpful, because a professional can create a safe space for you to take yourself back to that traumatic event, experience those feelings, and then the professional can help bring that context in for you. We can retrain your brain, and we can retrain those neural pathways, and can sometimes actually bring back the really important ones that might have been pruned away. Then it helps to allow our brain to fully integrate the experience and then finally move forward. I hope this helps you better understand what's going on inside your brain during a traumatic event. If there's something that I didn't touch on, you're hoping that I would, or if you're still asking questions about a particular aspect of what I talked about, feel free to leave me a comment below and I will answer your questions as best I can. Moving along in the show, I'm so glad that I get to have a conversation again this week with a member of our community. Let's go put on those trauma tapes.
The greasy cardboard of the pizza box sagged on my coffee table, a monument to a battle I had lost before it even began. Beside it, a crumpled, angry red letter screamed, "Final notice." I stared at the two objects, feeling a familiar, hollow ache settle deep in my bones. The pizza, which was supposed to numb the panic clawing at my throat, had only left me feeling sick and bloated. The letter was a stark, undeniable symbol of a life I could no longer pretend to control. For years, my internal mantra had been a simple, relentless command. Figure it out. It was the voice of my childhood, the engine that drove me, and the warden of the prison I had built for myself. But tonight, sitting on my couch in the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the voice was gone. There was nothing left to figure out. My tank was empty. I had run out of road. I was tired, so profoundly, deeply tired of carrying the weight of it all alone. It was a weight I'd been handed so early that I can't remember life without it. Growing up, our house was a whirlwind of my parents' comings and goings. They were dedicated and hardworking, focused on providing, on keeping the middle-class dream afloat. Their love was expressed in paid bills and a roof over our heads, not in emotional availability. As the oldest, I became the default caregiver, a mini-adult tasked with feeding, entertaining, and managing my younger siblings. The phrase that defined my youth was meant as a compliment. "You're a smart girl, Tara. You can figure it out." It was tossed to me when I struggled with homework, when the kids were fighting, when I felt overwhelmed. It was supposed to build my confidence, to foster my independence. But what it built was a wall. It taught me that my struggles were mine alone to solve, that asking for help was an admission of not being smart enough. Failure wasn't an option, because failure brought the quiet, cutting shame of a disappointed look or a sigh that said, "I expected better." The wall, once just a few bricks high, became a fortress the day my brother got sick. I must have been 8, maybe 9. He was burning up, his small body racked with feverish cries. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. This was more than a common cold. I did everything I could think of. Cool claws, sips of water, but he only got worse. Terrified, I broke my own cardinal rule. I called my mom at work. I could hear the annoyance in her voice before I'd even finished explaining. "He's really sick," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I don't know what to do." The response was not a shout, but a sigh. A heavy, exasperated sound that traveled through the phone line and landed like a punch to my gut. "Tara, for goodness sake, you're a big girl. You're a smart girl. You can figure it out. Give him some Tylenol. I'm busy. Don't call unless it's an emergency." The line clicked. I stood in the silent house, the receiver cold against my ear. An emergency was exactly what this felt like, but the message was clear. My fear was an inconvenience. My inability to cope was a failure. In that moment, a switch flipped. I made a vow in my terrified 9-year-old heart. Never again. Never ask for help. Always figure it out. That vow became the operating system for my adult life. It propelled me to work ridiculous hours, juggling jobs and responsibilities with a relentless drive. I became the strong one, the reliable one, the person who never said no, who never admitted to struggling. But beneath the surface, the cracks were spreading. Financially, it was a disaster. I was too ashamed to admit I was in over my head, so I let debt pile up like snowdrifts. Each credit card bill, another secret to keep. Another problem to figure out in the dead of night. Emotionally, I was an island. Food became my only confidant, a silent, comforting friend that didn't judge or shame. Overeating was my way of pushing down the anxiety, of numbing the crushing loneliness of my self-imposed isolation. Even in my most intimate relationship, with a man I truly loved, I kept a part of myself hidden, terrified that if he saw the real, struggling me, he would meet me with that same dismissive sigh from all those years ago. Which brought me back to my couch, the pizza box, and the final notice. I was drowning, and I had finally run out of strength to pretend I could swim. The sound of the front door opening barely registered. My partner Mark walked in, his cheerful greeting dying on his lips as he saw me. He took in the scene, the takeout containers, the letter, the utter brokenness in my eyes. He didn't speak. He just sat down beside me, wrapped his arms around me, and held on. He didn't offer advice. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just held me. And in the solid, silent safety of his embrace, the fortress I had spent a lifetime building began to crumble. "What can I do to help, Tara?" he asked softly, his voice devoid of judgment. The question, so simple and so genuine, was the one thing I was not prepared for. It wasn't, "Why can't you handle this?" or "What did you do now?" It was an offer, a lifeline. And in my state of complete and utter exhaustion, my desperate need for that lifeline finally outweighed the fear of being shamed for needing it. The sobs came then, a raw, wrenching sound that seemed to tear up from the very foundation of my soul. I cried for the little girl I'd been, left alone with her sick brother, for the young woman I'd become, drowning in debt, for the lonely adult who had never learned how to let anyone in. And through the tears, the words tumbled out about the bills, the overeating, the constant, suffocating pressure. Mark just listened. When I was finished, my voice a raw whisper, he pulled me closer. "We'll figure this out," he said, his words a gentle echo of the phrase that had once haunted me. But this time it was different. Together. You don't have to do it alone anymore. That moment was not a magic fix, but it was a beginning. It was my first terrifying step into vulnerability. With Mark's unwavering support, I found a therapist who specialized in trauma. In our sessions, I began to understand that my hyperindependence wasn't a character flaw, but a survival mechanism I had forged in childhood. I learned to see the 9-year-old version of myself not with shame, but with compassion. I discovered the work of Brené Brown, and in the pages of books like Daring Greatly, I found a language for my experience. Vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was courage. Shame was a universal human experience, not a personal failing. My healing has been slow. It has been practicing small acts of trust, asking Mark to pick up groceries when I'm tired, admitting to a friend that I'm having a bad day, Each time I reached out and was met with empathy instead of dismissal, another brick came out of my wall. I've learned to sit with my feelings instead of eating them, to recognize anxiety as a signal rather than a threat. Recovery, for me, isn't about becoming a different person. It's about dismantling the old defenses to finally meet the person who has been here all along. It's about building a new life, one where asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. It's learning to manage my finances with Mark, turning a source of shame into an act of partnership. It's replacing secret binges with long walks and honest conversations. Tonight, there is no pizza box on my coffee table. Instead, there's a stack of budget worksheets and 2 mugs of tea. The weight is still there, but it's no longer mine to carry alone. I look at Mark, see the love and support in his eyes, and feel a quiet sense of peace. The voice in my head is still there, but it has changed. It no longer commands me to figure it out alone. Now, it gently reminds me that I am worthy of help, that I am worthy of connection, and that the bravest thing I have ever done was to finally let someone in.
We're rounding out the show now. We've come to our third act in the show once again, and it's time for us to call out some more BS. Oh my God, just get over it already. How many times have you heard this? Or maybe said it to yourself? I see you. The myth we're tackling today is this idea that you can just get over trauma, right? This phrase implies that healing is a choice, a simple act of willpower, and that if you haven't healed, it's a personal failing. I call BS on this. Trauma's not a weakness. It is a biological response to an event or a series of events that overwhelms our ability to cope, like we talked about in our first episode. Trauma is going to be one of two things: a major single event that triggers an intense survival response, or multiple repeated events during development that trigger the same response frequently. Our F4 response, as I like to put it, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, 4 Fs. I thought it was cute. The 4F response. This is a complex survival tool that our minds and bodies use to stay alive in the face of danger. When you're in a traumatic situation, your brain and body are not concerned with logic or long-term healing. They are solely focused on survival. This is an instinctual biological reaction, not a conscious choice. Because of this, it's not just as simple as just get over it. It takes time, intention, and a tremendous amount of energy and focus to dial down that heightened state of alert. Healing from trauma is a process of retraining your brain and body to feel safe again. It requires patience and compassion for yourself and your nervous system. So the next time you hear someone say, just get over it, or you feel tempted to say it to yourself, remind yourself that trauma is a powerful biological experience. It's not just a matter of willpower. It is a matter of rewiring and recovery. Well, looks like that's episode 2 in the bag. I had just as much fun doing this one again today, guys, and I'm so glad that those of you who stuck around to the end were here with me. I really hope you enjoyed the content I brought to you today. If there's anything you really enjoyed, anything you'd like to see more of, feel free to leave a like and comment down below. And I'd really like it if you want to keep tuning in. I'd love it for you to subscribe on whatever platform that you're taking in this podcast with. I really dead set on having this podcast become a growing community where we can support each other, bring more awareness to trauma, and help each other and validate what we go through on our journey to recovery. But it looks like that's all for now. I'll see you next week. Bye.